And this month's Where Did the Road Go is sponsored by Super Inframan, Allison Cook, and Eric Hervin. Thank you all so very much for your incredible support.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Soraya.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? And tonight I am talking to Mike, who is the host of Mind Escape. Hey, Mike.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
And you also have a, we're going to talk a little bit about this, you have a social network you've started.
Yeah, my buddy Lee and I created, it's a new platform, it's called Indra's Web. You can check it out at indrasweb.org. Yeah, it's a social media platform, and we designed it to connect open minds. So a lot of the topics, you talk about on this show, we talk about on our show, ancient civilizations, UFOs, paranormal stuff, even mainstream stuff. That's kind of the point, too, is I want to connect the mainstream with the fringe, and let's figure out what's what, because I think that that's a massive problem, is people either just using science or scientism, and then the other people just learning about fringe stuff and not knowing or having any basis behind, the material realm. So
yeah. Now it's set up. It doesn't look. It almost reminds me a little bit of MySpace with the setup.
Yeah, so it's super basic, and it'll probably evolve a little bit over time. Obviously, it's just fresh. And we're also working on getting it in the App Store. It's not in the App Store yet, but hopefully it should be in there soon. But yeah, it's very basic. The goal isn't to have all the bells and whistles, because I think that's why people get addicted to checking and doing and all the new features. This is more for pure dialogue and to getting at the root of what's what. Yeah,
okay. And it's open to sign up and now.
Yes, you can go on and sign up to, for a profile right now. We have a few hundred users currently. I haven't really promoted it that much yet, only because I wanted to, let the people on there kind of get used to it, play around a little bit. And then, now in the next couple of weeks, I'm really going to start promoting it and getting a lot more people on there.
Nice. Okay. And you host the Mind Escape podcast. How long has that been going?
Well, 3 years, just over 3 years now. I can't even believe it. We had you on, I think, episode 80 or something.
Yeah.
And that was almost a year and a half, 2 years ago now at this point.
Yeah, that's true. And you deal more with things like consciousness and stuff on the show.
We focus on a little bit of everything. The goal of the show is to, we don't talk about politics. We don't do conspiracy stuff. We just do things we want to learn something and help our listeners learn in the process. But our main topics that we focus on, consciousness, UFOs, psychedelics, just altered states in general, a lot of near-death stuff, a lot of that stuff. Actually, a lot of the focus lately has been on psychedelics, just because I'm a fan and I've used it to help heal my OCD and mental health issues, and I'm really into the research aspect of it. So we've been on a big psychedelic kick lately. But yeah, ancient civilizations. I mean, actually, that's how I got into your show 5 years ago. Before I even started podcasting, I was listening to your episodes with Randall Carlson and Laird Scranton, and that awesome video you did with John Anthony West with Laird Scranton at his house. That was a great video.
Yeah, it was. I am really lucky to have had that opportunity, I'll tell you.
Yeah, you are lucky.
That just kind of fell into it, and I was like, that sounds like a plan,
Absolutely. It's you were actually kind of an inspiration in a way, because you see Joe Rogan, he used to do a lot more of that kind of stuff. He doesn't really do that much of it anymore. And there's a few other smaller podcasts talking about that kind of stuff. But yeah, you had a lot of the people that I was interested in at the time on your podcast. Like I said, Laird Scranton, Randall Carlson, all those people. So that kind of drew me in, and I liked what you were doing, and you have a good radio voice and everything. So yeah, it's a good show. You do a great job.
Well, thank you. And we're the same way. No politics. No, we really don't do conspiracies. I did have Douglas Dietrich on for a couple of episodes early on, but at a certain point, I said I'm not doing conspiracies anymore either, because it's a rabbit hole that just never ends.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm just interested in other things, and that's not who I am anyways, and I'm not trying to say crazy stuff to get people to listen, if that makes yeah. I'm not saying necessarily everybody that does that is doing that. I'm just saying that that's just not, it's not worth my time. So but yeah, and you're, like I said, you're a big inspiration, and we've had some of those same people. We've had Laird on a few times. We've had recently Randall Carlson, so we've had some of those people on, and I think like I said, you were kind of a part of the catalyst for me kind of getting into this stuff.
Well, that's awesome. I remember I found Randall from Red Ice Radio.
Oh, okay.
Because Red Ice Radio, I mean, they went very alt-right political at a certain point, but before that, they were all lost civilizations and paranormal, and I liked the host because he let his guests talk, Yeah. And one day I'm like, Randall Carlson, who's this guy? And I'm, halfway through the thing going, I need to talk to this man,
Right. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. Like I said, I see, I'm a musician, or at least I used to be. I used to play live, jam bands. I know it's not that kind, the kind of music you're into, but I've been big into like Fish and Grateful Dead, and I've always been playing like live improv bands. And then I kind of have a spiritual awakening like 5 years ago, right about the time I started getting into listening to podcasts and that kind of stuff. So it wasn't really something that I had always been into. And also I found all these like notes and stuff. My grandfather was a visionary inventor who also was fascinated with like ancient Egypt and had all these sketches of the pyramids and trying to figure certain things out. And he had these meditation notes and stuff. So my godfather gave me those and kind of initiated me into that. And then I got super interested. And yeah, I love like the esoteric stuff. So
what kind of stuff did your grandfather invent?
He invented the early, the door sensors that now I think they're optical, but they used to be, I think, microwave based. And he had something to do with that. He also had the early satellites that brought cable to the Michigan area. Those old cable boxes, the twist dial ones.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember. Yeah. So like that kind of stuff. And like, when fiber optics were new, all that kind of, he didn't invent that specifically, but just different things based off those.
Nice. Huh.
Yeah.
So what form did your spiritual awakening take?
So as I mentioned, it was partly the learning more about my grandfather, who was fascinated with ancient Egypt, and even my uncle and godfather to this day still has. My grandfather, when he had money from the inventions and all that, the business side of things, before the stock market crash, which he took a big hit on that, and was that 84 or 85?
Somewhere in there.
He took a big hit because a lot of his stuff was tied up in technology and stuff. But before that, he had all these there's Nefertiti busts in their house with these intricate like glass mirrors with hieroglyphs, like not ancient Egypt hieroglyphs, like they were Egyptian hieroglyphs, but he had them say things that he created, if that makes sense. Like he had his own, riddles and stuff on there. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, so stuff like that, and then I really got into like meditation, and I already kind of had a history with psychedelics, so all these kind of things kind of came together.
Are you sure you're not part of the Croft family?
No. But the other aspect of this too, I was going to mention, is my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer like 3 or 4 years ago. And that kind of shook me up out of like the day-to-day consciousness thing I was stuck in. So, you start to ponder life and the meaning of life. And I got really into philosophy, teleology, ontology, epistemology. What do we know? How do we know it? what's the purpose, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, nothing drove me like really upset me more about what's his name? The guy who was in the wheelchair.
Stephen Hawking.
Stephen Hawking is when he said, philosophy is dead, and it's like, no, it's not. Like, and I've heard other people echo that, and I'm like, you don't understand what philosophy is if you think that.
I think one of the most important things about science is actually a part of philosophy, which is the philosophy of science. And you look at Thomas Kuhn's work on, paradigm shifts and scientific revolutions, and it's almost certain that there is going to be more paradigm shifts in scientific revolutions. It comes, this bottleneck, and then it's this whole process. And that's actually, I think it's what's the name of that book? It's like The Structure of Scientific Revolutions or something like that. I'd have to look it up. I've read it a few times. But yeah, it's this idea that, look at science, look at what Newton discovered, and we don't really go by that anymore. We go by Einstein. But is there going to be another Einstein after Einstein? Almost certainly. Yeah. Like, what we know about the universe is not set in stone by any means, nor is science. Most of the universe is made out of dark matter and dark energy, which is made up of 95% of the universe. So we don't even know what 95% of the universe is made up of. So
yeah, and that stuff may very well not even exist. We have zero evidence of it.
Right. It just doesn't interact with light. So whatever that means to you.
Well, but it's also put in place because of their beliefs about the Big Bang. Like, they need it for the Big Bang to work. So if it's not there, then they really have to rethink a lot of stuff. And I think they're getting to that point.
And Vera Rubin, I think, is the one that discovered dark matter initially. And I think her hypothesis, or I don't know if it was somebody that built off of it, but it's the idea that dark matter is what propels the spiral galaxies, so it's the dark stuff in between the arms, and that's what propels it. So I don't know if that's still the case.
That was the other thing, holding it together. I mean, that's one of the reasons I like the electric universe idea, is that they can generate literal galaxies in the lab.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, you don't need dark matter for that. You just need electrical fields and magnetics and stuff. Right.
I just think in general, I love science. I read tons of scientific papers for our podcast, lots of psychedelic ones, physics ones, archaeology ones. And it just seems like, again, this idea that science is so empirical and what's known today is going to be fact tomorrow. I think that that's an illusion. And I don't know why a lot of scientists kind of put all their eggs in one basket or die on certain hills. It's like, you should know better if you've studied the philosophy of science.
Yeah, and I mean, given 100 years, we're going to look back on our state of science and think we're silly.
Yeah, absolutely.
In 100 years from that, same thing.
That's 100% certain. I don't even think you can argue. I don't even think anybody intelligent could make that argument.
And it may not be that everything we know is wrong. Some of it's probably right, but some of it's wrong, and some of it we're probably not looking at in the right frame.
Yeah, it'll be altered or the name changed, or maybe we'll have more of a bird's eye view of what was going on, so we'll know that was just a piece of the puzzle. There's a lot of that. So yeah, I'm not going to say like every single thing is dumb, and we still know things from 400 or 500 years ago that are true to this day. And even if you look back at the pre-Socratics and ancient Greeks, they knew a lot of stuff about the universe without even going to space and just using geometry and mathematics and stuff. So
right. And I mean, there's a lot of ancient knowledge there that we don't understand, things that have been lost. I mean, how did they build the Great Pyramid? How did they move the blocks in Baalbek? These are things we would have trouble doing today, if not flat out couldn't do today, but yet they could do it with what we consider primitive technology.
Oh, 100%. I mean, you keep hearing all these different theories. I mean, the one I have liked the most recently in the last few years with the Great Pyramid is the internal ram theory. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I don't think so.
I think the guy's name's Jean-Pierre Louboutin. He's like I think he's a French architect that got like obsessed with it, and then he used all this data from some I think I don't know what country did it, but they did like some sort of infrared mapping and stuff, and he used his own ideas mixed in with a lot of that stuff, and basically, it's kind of like building up from the inside using these ramps kind of to pull the blocks up and around, kind of a thing.
Oh, okay, I am familiar with that.
So there's the ramp theory, I think, that most people talk about, which is like this massive ramp, and then most people would argue, well, you would need more blocks from Tura, the limestone that they use to, you need more blocks than there's actually blocks in the pyramid. So, and then some people speculate, well, maybe they took some of the blocks from the ramp to, keep working on the pyramid. I don't know. So I don't necessarily like that one as much. So,
and there was, I want to say, Graham Hancock had pointed out that in some cases, the blocks may have been poured in place.
The geopolymer theories what's the name of that one that just came out, that documentary? It's Pyramid K 2019 or something like that. I think it's on YouTube. I haven't watched it yet, but my buddy Martin we had on the show, he was talking about it, and seems kind of interesting, and there's a lot of people that like the geopolymer idea, or make like a Egyptian concrete type of a thing.
Yeah. Well, there's also the rocks in like South America, like the walls fitting together in absolute perfection. It's like, okay, so did they somehow manage to carve these rocks out exactly like that, or could they pour them like that? Morph them somewhat. Yeah,
the Sacsayhuaman, those walls, and there's actually on Easter Island, there's a couple of those types of walls on Easter Island too. Really? And we know now through genetics, Thor Heyerdahl's Kon-Tiki, the idea that you could have made a raft on the shore of Chile or Argentina and floated your way to, Easter Island or French Polynesia was very doable.
Yes.
So yeah, you have a lot of similarities, and now genetically, I think they found that there's like a small percentage of South American DNA that's not that was pre-Columbian. So that's pretty interesting.
It was David Hatcher Childress, I think, that said he was standing in a museum in Mexico and realizing that if he didn't know where he was, he might have thought he was in China because the artifacts are so similar.
Yeah. I mean, I'm all about that kind of stuff. I think that there's probably a lot more getting around and similarities. It doesn't even have to be one civilization. It could just be, like today, like cross-culture stuff. Like we like, what the people in Canada, this new, fad over there, or, maybe we like what these people are doing over in Europe, and we take part of that, so it could be something like that.
Just on a longer time scale, I would think.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, unless they had some kind of psychic internet.
Yeah, it was called the Akashic, right?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I like the like the golden age type of concepts where we have, we go through cycles where we're more advanced in those ways.
Yeah, then, like the Yuga cycles.
Right, yeah. The great year.
Yeah, I don't know how I used to really be hard or believe hard on that. I'm not against it. I just think that, I don't know. I think the golden aspect of it just means that there's this like it's almost like a harmonic convergence in music. It's like everything coming together to work together. Okay. And I don't necessarily know if it's from the doing of the individuals or if it's just like by chance. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the person who got me into that concept was Walter Cruttendon with his Lost Star of Myth and Time, where he speculates we're in a binary star system.
Yeah.
And what made sense to me, like the idea would be that as the other star gets closer, we end up, in that golden age.
Right.
And that somehow it raises our psychic abilities and stuff like that. But then you have the work of Robert Schoch, where he's showing that people's psychic abilities in labs are higher during higher solar activity. So I can't help but wonder, like, if there's a secondary star and it's coming closer to us, is that affecting us in that way?
Yeah, that's interesting. Actually, that kind of Okay, so yesterday we did an episode with this guy, John Chavez, who just made this documentary about DMT. You can find it on YouTube. It's called DMT Quest. Graham Hancock tweeted it, Dennis McKenna, all the big names were tweeting it. He's friends with a lot of people, Wim Hof, all these people. So they were all tweeting it, and I think it got over like 100,000 views in just like a day or two. But
nice.
It's an amazing documentary about DMT, and it starts off with just clips of like Joe Rogan and Mike Tyson and all the pop stuff, but then he slowly works his way into like the hard science and comes to these theories about, it's all other people's research, but he does an amazing job of putting it together, all the latest research. And to your point about, like these golden ages and stuff like that, if we could figure out, like, let's say DMT is super important to some of the aspects of consciousness that we are trying to figure out, like why we're so self-aware and then ponder our existence relative to the universe, stuff like that, then that's huge, and his documentary talks about like the funding of the science of it and how it's really hard to get the funding to look into these kinds of topics, even though it's super important. And there was this other hypothesis that had to do with endogenous chemicals and how your fluid, your spinal fluid that, you're from your brain all the way down to your spine, they found contains DMT, and that it's possible that even all psychedelics still play off of the DMT enzyme. So, I mean, there's some interesting stuff there that hopefully we can figure some things out in the near future with all the psychedelic research.
Well, you said you've had some experience with psychedelics yourself.
Right.
When you're looking at this stuff, do you think you're interacting with an other, or do you think it's like a deeper part of yourself?
So are you talking about like psychedelic entities then?
Yeah.
Okay, so the whole DMT thing, I have never tried DMT. Obviously, we all have it endogenously in our body, so I find that super fascinating. But I have tried most other psychedelics, traditional, non-traditional. You have different alkaloid, different alkaloids too. So you have like the tryptamines, which would be like the psilocybin DMT stuff. Then you have like tropanes, which would be like datura, that kind of stuff. And then you have, the phenethylamines, MDMA, PCP, all those kinds of things. Now, I've usually trended more towards psilocybin, which is, like tryptamines and stuff like that. However, I have had two experiences that I would consider entity-ish. One was on a camping trip where I ingested psilocybin and MDMA, and there was like this crazy storm that I was in my tent just laying there, and wind was blowing really hard, and I saw a translucent grayish type being that had this I don't know, it was like a shimmer, something like that, almost like Predator but more pronounced, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So that was one experience. I don't know what to make of it. Earlier in the day, we were talking about like esoteric stuff, and I don't know if like the ancient archetype of Melchizedek, but my cousin was just yelling Melchizedek like all day long, and almost like he like summoned this entity or something like that. It was just a really weird thing, and maybe that was in the back of my mind, so I'm not saying that that's what that was for sure.
What is the archetype?
Just this idea that Melchizedek is an ancient order of priest. Some say like Jesus was a part of that order.
Okay.
Also, there's people that get crazy with it. There's also a lot of channeled material with Melchizedek in it too. So I don't know what to make of all that. I've looked into it. There's just not a ton of information, but it seems to me like it's from all my esoteric research that Melchizedek is this very interesting character that doesn't have, that's the other thing. Is it just one person, or is it a bunch of people or a line of people? I don't know. But yeah, so that was that one. And then I'm trying to think the other one. So I was at a fish show, and I took a large dose of MDMA, and I kind of I had to leave, early in the show. I just had to get out of there. Too many people, and I wasn't necessarily freaking out, but it just wasn't the time. So I ended up getting home, and that for like the next 4 hours, I saw these translucent-y like jellyfish. And usually MDMA is not a traditional psychedelic in the sense that you get a lot of visual effects. Usually it's more emotional, and you do get some tracers, but this was a very, very weird experience, and I just felt like these floating alienish jellyfish floating around. But the first one was weirder, the one in the tent, because I felt like that was external. I felt like that was something else, and they were trying to convey something just by being there, if that makes sense, almost like some sort of symbolism. Mm-hmm. And the jellyfish thing was weird in the sense that I felt like they were just like alien jellyfish floating around. I don't know, it just was weird. So, but to your point, is this external? I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to know. I know that I feel like I think it depends, to be honest with you, because I hear some trip reports or people's experiences where they sound similar to mine, where I could chalk it up to like part of my own consciousness or subconscious or something like that. And then I hear ones like that, well, that's for sure external. So I think it honestly depends.
Okay. All right. And it's such a hard question to answer, because where do you draw that line? I mean,
what's consciousness?
Yeah.
I mean, we can't do anything until we figure that out.
We don't know what consciousness is. We don't know what reality is. We don't know what life and death are. We don't know what time is. We're pretty ignorant about pretty much everything that we are.
Consciousness is the pretty much the main tool we use to figure everything out, and It's the one thing we don't understand. So,
well, there are some people who think we understand it, but they're wrong.
Yeah, it's the hard problem of consciousness for a reason, and they don't, even don't tell me mechanisms and all this. I mean, I'm not opposed to that, by the way. Like I like the fringe stuff. I like the metaphysical things and metaphysics and stuff, but I'm not opposed to the hard truth of reality if that's the case. I just don't. Again, back to the whole 100 years from now, 200 years from now, and scientific revolutions, paradigms. This is going to go on forever. Nobody's ever going to have the answers, and maybe that's the point. I don't know.
Very well could be. And I've used this analogy before, like we're in a fishbowl looking out into the room thinking we understand everything that's out there, when we can't even conceive of the street, much less other planets out there,
100%.
We have a very limited view of it all, and we think we have figured it all out. I mean, there have been, what was it, like 1897 or something, the Royal Academy of Sciences said we'd figured everything out, where science was done.
Yeah, there's a lot of scientism out there. I go on Twitter, and this is back to the Indra's Web thing. I would like to have a place where people can just go and like learn about these things and research and just be interested, without having like actual academics be like, chiming in on your tweet when you don't even follow them or something, like stuff like that. It's I get it. I guess I get why they're doing it, but it's like that's scientism. It's it's just another religion. It's just you believe in hard materialism or whatever, and you're trying to impose that on other people too, and you think you're right just because you went to school for 4 or 5 years extra. Like, I don't get it. You're just a person, you're just another person.
And there's plenty of people who went to school and are dumb as rocks.
Exactly.
But the other thing and we were talking about this a little bit before we started, is that people seem to confuse belief with fact.
Mm.
They're like, well, I know this, and it's because they think that or they believe it, but they don't. There's nothing supporting it other than their belief.
Right.
And you get it with everything. It's not just the paranormal.
So, back to, you were talking about Stephen Hawking saying philosophy's dead. It's not dead, because why the most important thing is to know thyself. And if you know yourself, then you know that you know probably nothing in terms of, you know some things, you know around you, but those are just observations. Like, what do you truly know? And when you come to the realization you truly don't really know anything. You don't know why you're here. You don't know what's going on exactly. You don't know how life began. You don't know if there's a purpose in the universe, if there's an objective reality. You don't know any of these things. We just have guesses and best guesses and information to work off of. So, yeah, I think that's a very blurred thing right now with content creators and, people want to believe in something. I think you see the kind of, you see religion kind of falling back a little bit. And I think that's built into our DNA, is to believe in something. So I think you have a lot of people kind of switching that belief into something else. It's just transferring it into something else. And I think that, some people are going to go into the hard material stuff and become atheists and new atheists and whatever. And then you'll have the other people that want to believe in whatever other crazy stuff. And then, again, it's just belief, though. There's no hard evidence,
And you especially get it on things like YouTube. Like someone will leave a YouTube comment, oh, no, that's wrong. Aliens are this. Or Bigfoot is this. And they're so
Do you get
certain.
Emails? Do people email you?
Yep,
yeah.
I get more emails than I can deal with. And some of them are like that as well. Like, oh, I know the answers to this stuff. Here it is. And it's like, thanks. Okay.
I've had a couple UFO ones recently where they were like, you don't know what you're talking about, and this is what it is. And it was like very, angry. And, we get nice ones too, but I find the angry ones to be kind of interesting. Like somebody took the time to write this very long email about how I don't know what I'm talking about.
And actually, speaking of that, let's talk about the guest you just talked to earlier today.
Yeah. So we had Matthew Roberts on. He wrote this book called Initiated. And he was on the USS Roosevelt, for the 2015 gimbal encounter, the UFO. So I don't know if people are familiar with the gimbal video, but it's like one of those 3 videos that came out, part of that 2017 New York Times stuff.
Right.
So he, the interesting thing to me is, though, in their conversation, it wasn't about that UFO. It was, even though that's part of the book and his brother finding out about the story and then him having to tell his brother, even though he knew a lot more, like he had seen the video when it came out and there was a lot of talk on the boat. And eventually he started to work for the Office of Naval Intelligence. But his whole book's more about paranormal stuff. It's about sleep paralysis and being assaulted and defiled by beings, and these blue female beings, and dark shadow people, and Jungian archetypes, and he's very he was studying the Kabbalion, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I thought it was interesting, and actually the 3 people I've talked to that have had those UFO experiences on those aircraft carriers have all been more interested in the consciousness and paranormal aspects of those scenarios.
See, I find that really interesting. I had minimal exposure to it because, honestly, videos are so useless as evidence at this point.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it's yes, that's interesting. We don't know what it is, but that also doesn't tell us what it is. You know what I mean? Like, right. We already know. If someone says, well, look, this video proves there's unexplained things in the sky. Well, yeah, I already know that. I don't need to prove that. I don't need to prove it to anyone. I'm aware of this, so that stuff isn't that interesting to me unless it's actually telling me something. And I don't know how a picture or a video is really going to do that. However, those personal stories I wasn't aware of. I know I heard one of the guys, I think on the Nimitz, say that if this thing was like a test vehicle or something, he would know it. And I'm thinking, how would you know it? If someone was trying to see if their test vehicle could slip by, professional pilots and stuff, you would specifically not know it.
Well, I think like the David Fravor, who was the pilot for the USS Nimitz Tic Tac, video. I mean, he was a Top Gun instructor. It's not like he's some random guy.
No,
but my point was going to be is that I think what threw them off is this thing went from like 60,000 feet to like water level within less than a second, which even if you're going to say it's some crazy technology, I mean, yeah, that's fine. How would you know if that was or not, I guess, to be honest, but that doesn't mean that it's not something crazier though either.
Oh, no, no. I make no assumption about what it is.
Right.
It's just, I'm saying that this doesn't, just because he doesn't know what it is, doesn't mean it's not some deep state, secret tech that they were testing.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I mean, I guess what it comes down to is like, how much do you believe in this, like, these like private companies, how far they've taken this technology? I guess that's what it comes down to. Like, do you believe that they've done some crazy stuff behind the scenes? And if that's the case, where did they get it? So that's why a lot of people believe that we do have some sort of recovered craft or Roswell or whatever the case may be, because how would we have gotten that, and we'll look at the last 200 years of technological advancements compared to, how long were we using horses and carriages and stuff like that. So,
but look how fast we're advancing too.
Right.
I mean, we went from computers that took up entire rooms to things 1 billion times more powerful that we stick in our pocket.
Right.
And in what, 70 years?
It's crazy, man. It's really crazy.
And I think it underestimates human ingenuity to say that we couldn't get there without aliens, or without, and the same way we're looking at like ancient structures. Oh, it must have been aliens. It's like, or people are just smarter than we give them credit for.
Yeah, I've never bought the whole. I don't think aliens obviously built anything on Earth. I like actually watching Ancient Aliens sometimes. It's entertaining. I like seeing, Göbekli Tepe, the ancient sites. And actually there's 8 episodes on like panspermia, which is a real hypothesis that should be taken seriously. So they're not all, about building megalithic structures. And I just don't understand how that became a thing anyways, in the sense that if you were going to travel or traverse, time and space, or you were coming interdimensionally or whatever, you're going to make these crude stone, and they're not crude in the sense that, they're beautiful and some of the architecture is amazing and whatever. But if you had that technology, you would expect something absolutely mind blowing. Yeah.
Well, at the same time, though, stone lasts.
That's true. I mean, and there's people that believe, that, and I don't believe it, but I'm not against people that do believe it. I know that in the academic stuff, that's like they're very against that,
Sure.
These days. They're like I said on Twitter, they go, if you say ancient aliens and an archaeologist sees it, they're going to come after you.
And I mean, I find the Ancient Aliens show entertaining at times. Sometimes it's a little aggravating, but sometimes it'll bring up something and I'm like, I didn't know about that. What's that? And then I have to go off on my own and research it.
That's a good point too. Actually, there's things that I've seen on there where I went to research, and even though they were wrong on the show, I found something that was important to what I was interested in from just digging into it more.
Yeah, and I think that's where those, and those shows also make it more acceptable for people to talk about this stuff.
Absolutely.
It's like, it may not be top notch, but at least it opens the conversation more. It makes people feel like they're not crazy for wanting to talk about this stuff or believing this stuff, whether it be ghosts, aliens, whatever.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not. I like your show because I learn about paranormal stuff from your show. I'm not a big paranormal guy in the sense that, like, I like obviously like UFOs and consciousness and altered states and metaphysical things, but I'm not investigating Sasquatch or fairies or, I'm not against any of that stuff. I just don't know anything about it, so.
And honestly, I think it's all connected on some level, although that level very well may just be us.
Right.
Like, I
have my own thoughts. I guess I've looked into Sasquatch a little bit. I think that it's probably, if not a bear on two legs, some cases, it could be some epigenetic memory where we're having like a flashback, and I know some people have theorized that before too. If Gigantopithecus was a real thing, which they think it was, then I see no reason why you couldn't have some sort of weird epigenetic flashback, just like how seeing a UFO can be some epigenetic flash forward if at some point there's some weird thing that we don't know about in that regard.
True. I don't know if you read Joshua Cutchins and Timothy Renner's book on Bigfoot. I mean, the paranormal phenomena surrounding it is just outrageous, and it's more common than not. This is one of the things with people who study this different stuff is that they tend to have blinders onto the other stuff.
Yeah.
You know, when I've never done that. I've always been interested in all of it, not realizing that at some point I would be like, wait a minute, this stuff is all interconnected. And the thing I see running through all of it is poltergeist phenomena. You see it with people who have had UFO experiences. You have people who have near-death experiences, often have poltergeist experiences. Most Bigfoot experiences resemble poltergeist experiences more than an ape in the woods. Of course, you have plenty of ghost stuff with poltergeist activity. I mean, it's something that's there on every level. It's like lights and poltergeists.
Yeah, like I said, I'm interested in that kind of stuff in the sense of like how it plays off of our consciousness.
Right.
And I've listened to some of your episodes. Yeah, you Joshua Cutchin and the other guy.
Tim.
I've listened to some of those episodes, and I find like I'll listen to it. You know, I find it interesting. I'm not going to go on my own and research it, if that makes sense. I'm interested in other things myself, and that's I guess where it comes down to is I'm not going to poo-poo that stuff because I don't know about it. I'm all about if you're going to study something, you can have an opinion on it. You know, if you're going to research, if I'm going to read scientific papers, I feel like I have a valid opinion to offer. If I meditate and I see weird stuff, you know, like we talked about those psychedelic experiences or whatever, those are my personal experiences, you know, so I can talk about those or have an opinion on them. I'm not going to have an opinion on Sasquatch or fairies or whatever the case may be, just because I don't study it. So I'm not going to poo-poo those people at all. That's, you know, I think that's in today's culture is very prevalent, is this idea where it's almost like Dunning-Kruger gone wild, where everybody thinks they're better than everybody or has a better opinion just because they've lived their own life. You know, it just doesn't make any sense to me.
And that's the thing. Everybody has their own experiences, their own. No two people, even twins, no two people have the exact same life experiences. You know what I mean? Like their viewpoints, the things that happen to them, the emotions they experience are all going to be different. So none of us see the world the same way.
Yeah, I agree with that. And like we were talking, you know, earlier and before, I'm all about bringing people together. You know, when I have somebody on my podcast that's cool, I like recommend them to other people that I know that do podcasts that I think would be good for their show. Or, you know, like Indra's Web, I'm trying to connect to open-minded people, and maybe there's some sort of cross contamination thing that can happen where something good comes out of it, you know, so like a paradigm shift or something that people can, you know, actually gain something from. So that's my whole thing is I want to bring people together, not, you know, tear people apart or compartmentalize people or whatever the case may be.
And that's the same way I am. It's like I want everyone to succeed at the stuff they're doing. I want people to share their ideas and try and build new stuff out of it. The problem you encounter, though, is that too many people are just like they're set. They think they know the answers.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, there's this old, well, it's not, you know, it's Plato. You know, you have, it's called the Euthademus, and it's part of, it's one of his dialogues. And he, you know, there's this idea, it's this thing called Aristic Rhetoric, where, you know, you have the sophists back in the day, which would be these people that would teach people how to win arguments and debates using certain types of rhetoric that wouldn't ultimately lead to truth. It would just help them win that argument, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's what we have all over the internet right now, is this Aristic Rhetoric, where people just want to fight and they don't care about truth as long as they win the argument. And I think that we need to change that. And I don't have all the answers. I'm trying to do my part with the podcast and Indra's Web and just being a good person and trying to connect people. But I don't see a good end in sight or a light at the end of the tunnel at this point.
Yeah, I really do. I feel like it's gotten worse over the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, when we're talking like the videos, the UFO videos there, when the TTSA came out, I mean, for those of us who have been studying UFOs for a long time, this stuff, it just raised so many red flags. It's like, okay, these people have been involved in disinfo, you know, before. this stuff it's like repackaging the same, oh, we're going to tell you all about UFOs that they've done in the past. And so, it's like, let's try and not get people to fall for this again. But then you get people who are, this is exactly what they wanted and exactly what they expected. And so they're going to believe it no matter what. And it was like, okay, nothing's going to come of this. They're not really going to give us anything that matters. And, TTSA at this point is pretty much fallen apart. And in how many years, they've never really given us anything that mattered,
So we've had people, we haven't had anybody from TTSA on our show, but we've talked about it a lot, at different points. And I've looked into it. I'm, pretty... I'm definitely a watcher of UFO Twitter and everything that goes on there. I think Lou Elizondo is, he's good. He's just looking for truth too. I think that I don't know what happened with the whole Fallout stuff. I mean, anybody can, I guess, speculate on what's going on, but I think that he was genuinely looking for answers. And then I think part of it is like you have this entertainment aspect of it that kind of got in the way of like the science and trying, initially, they talked about building like some sort of interstellar, or interdimensional, whatever machine or spaceship or whatever. And that never really came to be. So I think that initially that got people excited. It's like, oh, we're going to use this crazy technology and build something interesting, and that never happened. I read some of those books. A lot of it's, rehashing of a lot of stuff that's already been out there in ancient mythology and, ancient alien-esque stuff, cargo cult, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And then, some of it's interesting, the nonfiction stuff. I wasn't really huge on the fiction aspect of things. I'm just not a big fiction person in general. So it wouldn't, even if it was good, I wouldn't have probably been into it. But, to be honest with you, my whole thoughts on TTSA is, like I said, I think Lou Elizondo is really trying to do something, push at least for some sort of, not disclosure. Obviously, that's a stupid word at this point, but some sort of transparency, like let's get all the cards out on the table and then figure it out from there. Do we know something? Do we not know something? So I think that he's genuine. I can't really speak to the rest of, you don't see enough of, I didn't see really anything from any of the other people too much. So, but yeah, I mean, my thoughts on it are, I thought that they probably thought that they were going to be doing some crazy stuff and it just didn't pan out. And to your point though, I think that it was important because there is tons of people that are interested in UFOs now that were not before. I mean, I'm talking about people that I know that, this stuff was brought to their attention that would have never thought about it before. So I think that gets some of the older UFO people kind of, rustled a little bit because you have all these new people that don't really have a foothold on what's been going on or the history or whatever the case may be, talking about these things, and they feel like they were there first kind of a thing. So I think that there's that aspect of it.
Sure.
Like I said, I don't have any allegiances. I just look at information. I think that, part of the organization was trying to do some stuff, and the other part of it was just trying to do entertainment stuff.
I think it was more entertainment stuff than anything else. I think that, making money was probably the key thing there.
I mean, but did they? I don't know if they did.
Yeah, I don't know if they made what they thought they were going to.
Yeah.
Like I said, so I didn't follow it all that much because I didn't think it was something that was going to lead anywhere, and I don't think it really has. I mean, we've gotten a couple of interesting things, but nothing that's like changed the...
But do you consider more people being interested in UFOs in general? I think that's a win, in my opinion.
I think that's a win, yes, definitely. But that was already happening. They just made it happen a little quicker.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know. You have all these different factions, and then you have, it's like, oh, these things are threats, and we don't know if they're threats, or they're good. We don't know if they're good. It's like, we don't know anything. If we can't even figure out what they are, how can we figure out what their intentions are?
And the way that so we were talking about this the last couple of shows, I think, there's so few UFO cases that have not had the waters just thoroughly muddied around them. Military intervention, was this a PSYOP? Was it, we were talking on the last show, like Travis Walton's one of the few that, yes, something genuine happened to Travis. It doesn't look like it was a psyop. At least there's no evidence of anything like that. But like so many of these things, like Rendlesham looked like such a great case at one point, and then you start seeing that, oh, maybe it wasn't this, maybe it was this, and then you got people lying and making stuff up, and after a while, you're just like, I don't even know what to think of this anymore.
Yeah, I found that. I mean, I know he's probably given the interview 100 times, but I saw the Rogan Walton interview recently. Yeah, I mean, I remember watching Fire in the Sky when I was younger, and I'm being like, this thing creeped me out. I had nightmares, that gray type being, dragging him through the ship and whatever. And I know he said a lot of that stuff's dramatized, but yeah, it's creepy. It's definitely a creepy story.
I mean, I addressed my issues with his story on the last episode, so I'm not going to get back into that. But a lot of it also with the aliens, the extraterrestrial stuff, it comes down to the fact that so much of this stuff has been put into our view of it with hypnosis, and hypnosis is not a memory recovery tool.
Right.
And we didn't know that back in like when Whitley Strieber was getting hypnotized and when Bud Hopkins started doing this. But by the mid-'90s or so, this was something that we knew, and it's still being used today. And, you have a ton of people who have come out against it. Jenny Randall's over in the UK got their big UFO group to stop using hypnosis because it doesn't recover memories, but it does create memories. Like it creates new things, So it, as an altered state of consciousness, it definitely has some value. As a behavior modification tool, it's fantastic. It can help you stop smoking and things like that. But so much of what we have of, UFO lore has been also muddied by all the hypnosis stuff. And even Travis Walton, when I met him, I'm trying to understand like how much he remembered consciously before he was hypnotized, and he wouldn't answer the question. And I'm like, do you not know? Or do you think I don't believe you? Because I totally believe that something happened to you, but I'm really curious to know, like, did you remember waking up with these people around you and stuff prior to being hypnotized?
Yeah, and don't they say too that now if you're I've actually done hypnotherapy for my OCD. I didn't follow through. I probably wish that I did. This was pre everything going on now, when you could still go to the offices regularly without any sort of worries. But
right.
I had some positive results with it. Not as positive as psilocybin and CBT therapy, but I mean, I could definitely see the potential. Maybe even if I had somebody else doing it, maybe it would have even been better if I had sometimes certain people work better with other people. But
sure. Don't
they say that like these hypnotherapies that you can actually implant ideas, like you can lead people into thinking things, or like plant seeds in there,
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the stage tricks where they'll put a behavioral tick in. When you hear this, you'll do this. Yeah,
no, I think if you talk to, like I said, we've had Sean Cahill on. He was on the USS Princeton, which was next to the USS Nimitz, and had his own experience. He was on, I think it was episode, 2 or 3 of the Unidentified, I think. And then we've had Lee Adams on, who's my good buddy. He's actually the co-creator of Indra's Web 2, and he was stationed on the USS Nimitz, not for the encounter, but later on when he was stationed in Virginia, he had a really weird experience where it was New Year's Eve, I believe, and it was him and a few other people, and they were walking out or something, and they saw this giant, like, sky trash bag jellyfish thing. I don't know. We did an episode where he talks about it. It's this massive thing, and other people saw it too. And so yeah, he's had a couple UFO experiences himself. So yeah, these Navy people, it's not all UFO videos. They're very in tune with consciousness and esoteric stuff. And my buddy Lee, you should actually have him on. He has a book coming out May 4th on lucid dreaming. And he's a really interesting guy, and he knows a lot about like Jung. He studied Jung in college and stuff. So
I want to say he contacted me, and we were already talking about that.
You should definitely have him on. He's an amazing dude.
Yeah, because, let's see, Lee Adams.
Yep.
Yeah, he will be coming on.
Shout out to Lee.
Yeah, his book doesn't come out for a bit, so we were trying to decide if we wanted to have him on earlier, closer to when the book came out or not.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like I said, all these experiencers, they're good people. I don't have any complaints about anybody. I haven't felt weird. I've had a couple people on the show where I felt weird, like they were just trying to sell a book at some point, but for the most part, I feel kind of blessed that we've had pretty genuine, cool people on our show.
I mean, we've done so many listener stories shows and stuff, and it's rare that I see anything that even remotely raises a red flag. Every great once in a while, I'm like, I'm not 100% sure about this one, but it comes down to the fact that we weren't there. We don't know. We're not inside that person's head.
100%. And like I said, I try not to just judge I don't judge anybody. If you have a weird experience, who am I? I don't know.
Exactly.
I've had my own weird experiences. I can't, and people would probably think I'm crazy. People are probably listening to this, and thinking my psychedelic experiences are crazy. But, it is what it is. And I think my main thing lately has been, I really try hard to remove my cognitive and confirmation biases and try not to feed into the Dunning-Kruger and all that stuff. I'm really conscious of that now. So I'm really trying to get to a place where I can discern things without having some sort of attachment to it.
So explain to people what the Dunning-Kruger effect is.
So the Dunning-Kruger effect is if you're watching, let's say you're watching the Super Bowl next weekend and you're like, oh, that guy threw that pass and I could throw it better, but you've never played football and he's a professional athlete in the Super Bowl, so it's that mentality, and that's running rampant right now.
Back a few years ago, there was a study done in the UK where they asked all manner of men, from young to old, attractive to non-attractive. I mean, of course, that's all up to, the individual, but whatever. A wide range of men. Do you think you could seduce a supermodel? Every single one said yes.
That's funny.
And it's like, the people doing the study are like, they seem to really believe this. Like, every single one of them thought, oh, yeah, no, I have a shot.
I mean, that's something that's built into us too. Look, we all have, I don't know anybody that, we talk about like mental illness now. It's a big problem. It's running, it's a somewhat of a huge, massive problem right now. And I don't know anybody that doesn't have a mental health issue. Do you? I mean, I don't know anybody that I can say is like, oh, I wish I was that person. They don't have any issues. I mean, I think that now, more than ever with science and like psychology and psychiatry and, there's different, there's people that are narcissists. There's people that have anxiety disorders. There's people that have depression disorders. I know every person I know has something, whatever it is. So I don't know that and anybody's clean or perfect or whatever.
No, absolutely not. And some of it you're born with, and some of it you get through trauma and life experience and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's a part of life. It's one of the challenges I think we have to overcome, but we also have to understand that in other people.
Yeah, I mean, and that's actually the first thing I recognize in other people. Since I do have OCD, I can tell when somebody has some level of anxiety or depression or something's a little off. That's actually like one of the first things I do recognize. So, it's tough. There's no cure for, there's no cure for OCD. I mean, there's people that have claimed that there is or written books and this and that there's no cure. It's you might live with it on some minute level, but it'll always kind of be there. It's
a part of who you are.
Right. And not always. I mean, I didn't develop it until I was probably in my mid-20s, which is actually when a lot of young men develop a lot of their psychological issues. So.
And I wonder how much of that's culture-based.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it's, I always think about that. Was it some compound I tried? Was it some Did I do too much of this, too much of that? I've never been like addicted to anything, but I have tried a lot of things, so I don't know. I always think, is it something I've ingested or a compound or something, or is it something that was going to happen, anyways, and there was just some sort of catalyst? I think about that all the time.
And I wonder, too, how much of this stuff is connected to the sort of materialist nature of our existence, the sort of consumer, meat puppet sort of thing, You
are 100% dead on there, because when I was going through my spiritual awakening, that was when my OCD was most at bay, because I believed in this higher thing. And actually, even Plato and Socrates talked about that all the time, which was, when society doesn't have this higher calling or this higher power or something to believe in, society becomes very dangerous. And I think that we're seeing that right now. I think there's a lot of people out there that don't have that higher calling, or whatever you want to call it, whether it's belief in a creator or belief in a higher ideal, whatever it is.
I know the points in my life where I've been in the deepest depressions are the ones where I feel like I've sort of lost faith in things. Not necessarily, I've never been religious, but I've always had sort of a faith that there's kind of a point to what's going on. And so, like, it's those points where I've gotten to, where I've just lost that. I feel like I'm disconnected, like nothing matters, and that's when the real deep depression can set in.
100%. I mean, I'm right there with you. I've actually going through that kind of recently, where I believed in a lot more stuff when we first started our podcast. I mean, if you listen to our early podcast, based on what you wouldn't know, I'm the same person if you're listening to this conversation versus the first 50 episodes we did or whatever, because, I'll take for an example, like the Temple of Seti, you have those glyphs, and you have what looks like a James Bond car and a helicopter, and all these. And you look into it, and you watch the shows, Ancient Alien, all these things, and it's like, oh, this is what it is. They're trying to hide it, and then you look into it, and it's like, oh no, this is just two different dynasties that inscribe glyphs over each other, So it's like stuff like that. So when I started to dissolve that whole thing, I got into philosophy, and I think it gave me the tools to at least think about things from a more grounded and logical perspective. I still look into the fringe. I'm very about the fringe stuff. I'm trying to look at it through a more, a less contaminated lens, or I don't know how to.
I know what you're saying. Yeah. I mean, because sometimes there are very simple explanations for this stuff, and people don't look into it. They're just like, oh, this looks like this. It must be aliens, or whatever. And there's no like critical thought applied to it.
Yeah.
Like my thing has always been to try and get rid of the assumptions. Why are we assuming that because we see a light in the sky, that's an alien spaceship from somewhere?
Right.
I mean, what represents the UFO phenomena could literally be consciousness itself. There could be something that's literally conscious manifesting in our world, and that's how we're seeing it, or how it's interacting with us.
Yeah, I mean, there's even older stuff that, there's a book called Flatland by Edwin A. Abbott. It's like a turn of the century novella. And it talks about like dimensions, like what people can see on a one-dimensional plane, two-dimensional, three-dimensional, and you realize maybe the UFOs we're seeing like a piece of a 4D or 5D or 6D. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Like we're seeing the corner of something or the bottom of something or whatever the case may be.
There was an interesting thing I pulled off of Quora.
I saw that. I liked it actually on Facebook earlier. I read that.
So let's read this and then let's talk about this for a moment.
Okay.
Someone asked if there's any evidence that time travel exists. And this guy responds with, I wouldn't call it proof, but it's very intriguing. In the 9th century A.D., a Chinese writer collected folk tales, hearsays, and all kinds of wild stories that wouldn't have made it into history texts into a book called Yoyang Zazu. And so he has a few miscellaneous clips from it. He says, we can immediately tell most of these stories were tales of legends of superstition, but there was one story that leave people today scratching our heads. In the chapter on heaven, it recorded a story of an encounter between two young men who got lost trekking in the Mountain Song in central China and met a weird old man. The old man was dressed in very white cloth and used a strange bag as a pillow. He led the young men out into the mountains and told them that he was one of the 82,000 workers on the moon. He said the moon was made of 7 elements, that it wasn't a plate or a disc, but a globe. He said the moon doesn't shine, but reflects sunlight, and the bright and dark spots are caused by unevenness of the surface that casts shadows and reflects sunlight differently. The old man even showed them some of his strange tools and offered them delicate food that seemed like ingredients compacted together, which he said would make them healthy. After leading them back to the main track, the old man then disappeared. This story carried information over 1,000 years ahead of its time and was 700 years earlier than the first telescopes. It was so contradicting to the common sense at the time that it sat right among other tales of demons and monsters in the book. Today we can quite make sense of the story, and it sounds very much like an encounter with a time-traveling astronaut or a shape-shifting alien, or maybe it was just a coincidence between people's imagination with the truth. And
what's your opinion?
I mean, it's really interesting, absolutely interesting, and I wonder if, when we're talking about lost civilizations, who's to say we weren't on the moon at some point? And that this is a holdover from a previous civilization that just isn't on Earth anymore. And that's one of the theories with the UFOs is really like that breakaway civilization theory. Right, yep.
That maybe somebody got off or is on a remote outpost, moon, another planet, something like that.
Yep. I mean, there's tons of strange stuff in the solar system that looks artificial.
Yeah, I mean, you were talking about that on your UFO episode, the Muamua. We're actually having Avi Loeb on our podcast next week. So we're going to talk a lot about that because that's what his new book's about. His new book, Extraterrestrial. But yeah, I mean, he's a Harvard, astrophysicist, and he studies black holes and stuff like that. But he has this theory that a Muamua was a piece of something, and was propelled by a light sail.
Yeah, and it's possible. It's certainly possible. I mean, it can't be proved unless we can go get it.
Right. Well, I mean, his thing is, though, it's more about it's almost like he's an ancient philosopher, and he has this critique on modern science. Like that's the way he approaches it, where he kind of what we were talking about, like why isn't science should be funded by the public's interest in what they, whatever we find interesting, that's what they should be looking into. And instead they're doing these, he calls it like mental gymnastics, where they're trying to impress each other and get the Nobel Prize and, all this other stuff. So he has a really interesting view on all that stuff. And I like his views on science. And if you're going to be a visionary scientist, I think you kind of have to take some risks, like how,
definitely
what are we going to do, this slow crawl forever? And,
Yeah, the people who go down in the history books are not the ones that are going with the flow. They're the ones who are going against the flow and being right.
Right. And he's saying if we're going to look for aliens, we should be looking for like CFCs on other planets, like look for waste. Like that's how you're going to find, like is there any sort of waste?
But that's assuming they're like us.
Right, but I mean, if they became technological at some point, you would see something, right? You would know there would be something not congruent with the rest of the region or area in space or whatever.
Possibly. I mean, it depends on the technology. I mean, not everyone's necessarily as destructive as we are. That's
true. There could be. I mean, that I think that's his thing too. Is like maybe what if it was some sort of biological technology, or what if it was some sort of organic technology?
Right.
Even isn't that what the are you familiar with the Rua, Zimbabwe mass sighting? Those the kids that saw the UFO in Africa.
Yeah.
I think one of them was
actually.
The telepathic message was relayed that we shouldn't be so technologed or something along those lines, meaning that it had something to do with preserving like the earth and not being so gung-ho to jump ahead technologically.
Well, that, when we look at these ancient structures, we see a lot of evidence of potential sound technology that we don't have access to.
For sure.
So, I mean, that's a potential technology and power source that wouldn't necessarily leave wastes. I mean, we look at this stuff and go, well, there can't be an advanced civilization. What did someone say? Where are the soda cans?
Yeah.
So, I mean...
isn't that like... that's very Keel, right? Like the can thing?
Oh, well, the can thing. There was a creature that was a can, I think.
Yeah, and there was that was a big part of, like, what's that, Hellier? I watched the first season of that. What did you think about that?
Okay, so... They seem like genuine people. I think it's the right direction for this stuff to go. It did nothing for me. In fact, the can was the only thing that was kind of interesting to me because I think that the guy who saw it in his vision was experiencing a time loop. Like I've talked to people about what, because some people absolutely love it, and that's awesome. I think it's incredibly well done. It looks beautiful. I mean, the production work on it is phenomenal. I couldn't get through the second season because they started doing things that like we're talking about actually. So they talk to the
taking liberties.
Yeah, jumping to conclusions that aren't really merited. Like they go to a town and they make some bland assumptions about where Indrid Cold may have lived. They talk to Derringer's daughter who gives them this crazy tale about him dying in a spaceship chase or something. And then they're like, as they're leaving the place with very little actual anything, they're like, well, we proved Indrid Cold was a real person. And I stopped and went, no, you didn't. What? And I'm like, I got to stop it now. I can't. After this episode, I need a break.
Right. No, I thought it was entertaining, but like the email thing, and even they early on were like, somebody could be just messing with us.
Yeah. I think it was someone messing.
So how did it go from the whole thing being started off with somebody possibly messing with you to, like you said, like knowing Indrid Cold was real and, all this means some very specific thing, I don't know. And then, I don't know. I don't know what to think of it. I think that, if they found a cave, goblin or something, now we're talking.
Right. Well, yeah, he was also on, I think it was the Penny Royal podcast, and what did he say? I can't remember what he said. Something else where I'm like, no, that's not a thing. It's like he was saying something very definite that wasn't a definite thing. They claimed, we went to the place, and sure, there was no one by that name ever there, and no one, fit the description, but we found the place. We just don't remember where it is. And I'm like, no, you found a place that could possibly fit the very rough description you had. That's what you found. You did not find the place. There was no way that you verified that,
Right. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think there's more interest, like if you're going to talk about that kind of, I'm just trying. We had Dr. Gregory Little on one of the episodes we were talking about. I think it was Edgar Casey is what we were talking about. And Edgar Casey was born in Hopkinsville, and we were talking about like a possible connection between that Hopkinsville incident, with those goblins or grays or whatever was going on, and some sort of that being some sort of point where maybe weird things do happen in that area.
Oh yeah, almost certainly. I mean, it's one of those areas that definitely has some weird stuff to it, and I think, like, if they just kind of stood back from the Hellier stuff a little and didn't make those type of statements, they'd be a lot better off. Like, because they're making these closed statements like we've proved this when they didn't prove anything. They created a possibility that this might be a thing. Yeah,
and this all comes back to what you were talking about, like fact versus opinion. Right, and then also, again, you go back to, there's debate on who exactly said it first. Know thyself. Was it Thales, the first, philosopher, or was it Socrates? There's debate over all that kind of stuff. But know thyself. So if you know thyself really well, I think you have a better chance of communicating, and figuring things out with other people if they know themselves equally. You know what I'm saying? So if we all just knew ourselves better, I think we would have a better or an easier time figuring out what's objective, what's not, what we can agree on, what we can't, that kind of a thing.
And I find that people will think they're on opposite sides of something, but actually agree on so much more than they disagree on. And it's those disagreements that get amplified. It's like, oh yeah, we agree on 9 of these things, but we don't agree on the 10th. So we can't be friends. It's
right.
It's like, why not just accept that not everyone's going to see things your way? I mean, again, like I was saying before, we all have a different experience of life. And sometimes we have to understand that we can't just force these ideas on other people. You can't just say, well, you have to understand this. No, they don't. No one has to understand anything. If you want someone to understand, you have to actually be able to, to see where those points overlap,
Right.
You got to start with, what do we agree on? Okay, now why are we seeing this differently?
Right. And I think that we need to do a better job of creating this culture of like holding people accountable. Like, again, like the Dunning-Kruger thing. Like, if somebody, says I can do that better and they're watching TV and they've never done that thing, well, how could they do it better than a professional? It doesn't make any sense,
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like almost like you're telling yourself this lie over and over and over, and your ego is just going crazy, and you have no accountability. And I think that we need to create better versions of ourselves to, again, interact with other people and figure out what's what without having that echo chamber, or that cognitive or confirmation bias.
And there's also the fact that we often feel like we need approval from others. Like people in the UFO world are always trying to impress the skeptics and the scientists, and it's like, stop. Just do what you're doing and don't worry about it, Yeah,
lots of people go after Neil deGrasse, and it's like it's this or it's that, or, pay attention to this, and it's like, this guy doesn't care. If he cared, he'd talk about it. He doesn't,
Right.
And if you even change his mind, he wasn't interested in to begin with. So why wouldn't you try and talk about it with somebody that's actually passionate about that can actually have an interesting conversation with you about it? This evangelical mindset about everything. It's like, just because you love something doesn't mean somebody else has to love that same thing.
Right, exactly. And I just think there's this sort of overall insecurity with people in general, where we need some kind of like okay from a higher power. I mean, again, UFOs, you have, well, the government needs to tell us the truth. It's like, well, maybe the government doesn't know the truth.
That's what I think.
That's what I think too. But it's like they almost, the same, government that they're lying about everything. They just need to tell us the truth, and then you'll believe them,
Right. I mean, and look, maybe they do know. They probably do know more. They have technology that we don't, that a normal person doesn't. Of course, they have more data. Of course, they have more information, and maybe that could be helpful to the people that are, studying these things or interested. I don't know. Maybe that's where that conversation needs to be had, where it's like, let's get the information out there so people that are interested can research it more, even if you don't know, right? So.
Yeah.
I don't know. We live in a crazy world and crazy times right now. That's for sure.
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I guess.
Yeah, it's never dull. At least lately, it's like we're living in the ultimate reality show.
That is also true. But I don't know. Like I feel like people spend too much time wanting approval of others rather than just doing their thing.
I mean, it's kind of normal, I think, in some regard, right? Because
normal.
I think that's what drives us, right? We want, early on, I should say, I don't know if this is true for you, but early on, I had a list of like heroes, people I really enjoyed reading their books or whatever that I wanted to interview.
Yes.
And I've interviewed a lot of those people now, and it was an amazing experience. But it's like it even evolves from there, So it's like. Mm-hmm. I think I've lost to some of that childlike wonderment of it, where it's like, that's my dream, that's my passion, where it's still my passion. It's just my passion in a different way, if that makes sense.
Sure. I mean, there were, when I started the show, there were 3 people I really wanted to talk to. And I said, even if the show fails miserably, if I get to talk to Graham Hancock, Andrew Collins, and Robert Schoch, I'll be happy. Graham's the only one I haven't had on. I have talked to him, but I've never had him on the show, mostly because I never followed up on him saying he would come on when his latest book came out. But at a certain point, I was like, I've heard what these guys have to say. Like I love Graham. Graham is amazing. But I don't think having him on the show is going to bring up anything necessarily new. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, he's been on so much stuff and he's said so much out there. It's like, I want to bring on the people that don't get in the spotlight, the people that have different things to talk about.
Right.
Like, I was thrilled that Patrick Harper came on. I was just like, he said yes. Oh my God, I'm going to talk to Patrick Harper, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's fun, right? Like I said, it's like it's exhilarating in a certain way, and I think you should still have Graham on. I think you could probably do an interview that's still unique based on what I know about you and what you're interested in and stuff. I think I've been turned down by a couple people that I wanted to have on that because we didn't have a big enough audience.
Yep.
I mean, that was a little while ago, but
that happened to me early on as well.
I won't, like I said, we've had Carlson on, and I haven't talked, to Graham or anything like that. I would love to have him on. We haven't, tried to figure that out at any point, even though a couple people have offered to connect. But one of those people you mentioned definitely turned me down for not having a big enough audience. So, I mean, it is what it is. I'm not bitter about it. I get it. You have, limited amount of time. I'm sure a lot of people want to interview you. So, but it's just like, it is weird in that sense that even if you're super passionate and interested and you feel like you could have a great dialogue with somebody, it's not always going to come to fruition. And I think that was a lesson that I learned along the way, is to not let it get to me, Yeah,
and a couple of people I wanted to have on passed away before I had them on.
I've talked to a couple publishers where I'm like, I love this book. Can I have this person? They're like, oh, that person passed away last year. You know, so that definitely happens.
So we're almost out of time. So tell people where they can find your podcast.
So the easy way would be you can go to mindescapepodcast.com. We have all of our stuff on there, our Patreon, our Discord, our Indra's web link. You can just go there. We do our podcast, Mind Escape, live on YouTube. Sometimes if the connection's not great on the other side, we will do like a Skype or something and then upload it later. But for the most part, we do our episodes live. And go to indrasweb.org, INDRASWEB.org. And just real quick, you can read the blog and you'll get the idea of why, other than the reasons I talked about it created, because there's a little bit more to the story and the metaphor of people. I should have mentioned this, but Indra's net is a ancient Hindu and Buddhist metaphor. There's this, Indra's a god, obviously, but Indra's net is this idea that the cosmos are all connected via this net, and the planets and the stars are like these jewels or pearls that reflect off of each other. So I had this idea of let's connect people, and using this metaphysical metaphor, and then it worked perfectly. So that's pretty much the gist there. But go to mindescapepodcast.com and and we're not trying to, Indra's web's not, you still go on your Discord, still do your other social media stuff. It's just to get away from the trolling and the nonsense, and it's a place to have real conversations with real people.
And it's a very nice looking site.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
And how often do you do your show?
Sometimes we do 3 episodes a week, but generally it's usually 2.
Okay.
So.
Are there set times that people should tune in?
No, I mean, if you want to join our Discord channel, I usually will post, ahead of time, like we're doing this now or here or whatever. It's just hard when you have guests and you want to work with their schedule too. So we never really have a set time or day. But I post it on Discord, or I'll mention it at the end of some of our episodes, stuff like that.
All right, cool. Well, thanks for joining me, Mike.
Thanks for having me on, man. This is awesome. Like I said, I was a fan of the show before, and it's weird that I'm on now, but I really enjoy what you do and what you've put out there, and I really enjoy the energy and passion in which you do what you do. So thank you.
Absolutely. I want to take a moment here to thank all of my Patreons. It's because of you this show is able to exist. And I want to give a special shout out to those pledging $10 or more. Super Inframan, Allison Cook, Eric Hervin, John Blackburn, Ken Hunt, Chris Cordner, Dan Eckert, Tim, Jim and Sophie, Beverly Williamson, Joel Thomas Runyon, Empty K, Nagatha Christie, Patricia W., Barbara Fisher, Will Powell, Big Boy Limina, Craig Parmenter, Walker, Joanna Rojas, Maddie, David Moore, Vincent Treewell, Stone Wilderness, Luke Osborne, Becky Trainer, Rob Drummond, Alex Whitcomb, Edu Camahort, Tactical Therapist, Janet Bunderson, 36 Dingo, Taylor, Sam Sharon, Jennifer Campbell, American Rambler, Kevin, Chris Ernst, Andy McNamara, Sedger, Dominic O'Malley, Riker and Stark, J. Otto Bullitt, Jose A., Charles Davis, Roger Gonzalez, Craig Cicernos, Ray Benedetto, Linz Jackson K., Alfred Tuttle, Kevin Schreck, Patricia Giaquinta, William Lovelace, Mark Brady, Ad Noctum, Carla Mahoney, and James Lattimore. Thank you all so very much. All right, if you enjoyed that conversation, we go for another, 2 hours or so on a Patreon segment. So if you're not a patron, you can become one at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Just click on the Patreon link. There are links to everything there. Our Discord, our Facebook pages, Twitter, everything. So anything you want Where Did the Road Go related, you should be able to find at wheredidtheroadgo.com. See you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.